From the moment I met Jake, I knew our lives would be a roller coaster. I was always the type to plan everything out. By the time I turned 28, I had a stable job as a lawyer, a nice apartment, and a clear idea of where I wanted my life to go. Financial stability was important to me, and I prided myself on my ability to manage my finances. Jake, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. The first time we met, he had this infectious energy about him that drew me in. He was a tall man with messy brown hair and a carefree smile that could melt anyone's heart. We met at a mutual friend's party. I was discussing a recent case I had won at work, and Jake walked over, drink in hand. "So, you're the famous lawyer Rachel everyone's talking about," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" "The guy who's about to change your life." He winked. Laughing, I replied, "That's a bold statement, but sure, I'll bite. Tell me, how do you plan on doing that?" Over the next few hours, we talked about everything, from our childhood memories to our future dreams. He told me about his love for adventure and how he often went on spontaneous trips just because he felt like it. He said he believed in living in the moment and enjoying every second of life. I found his perspective refreshing. Here I was, someone who always planned ahead, and then there was Jake, someone who took each day as it came. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. He introduced me to a world of spontaneity, and I brought a bit of order to his chaos. Our dates were always full of surprises. One day, he would take me out for a fancy dinner, and the next, we would be on a random road trip to nowhere. It wasn't just the fun times that made me fall for him. It was also the way he cared for me. He would always make sure I was okay, and he had this unique ability to make me feel special. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find my apartment filled with candles and roses. Jake stood in the middle of the room, a huge grin on his face. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up," he said. I smiled. "You always know how to make a bad day better." We settled into a routine, and before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together and even getting married. Our relationship had its challenges, especially when it came to our different views on money. I was always careful with my spending, while Jake was more impulsive. "Come on, let's just book that trip to Europe," he would often say. I would reply, "We need to plan it out, Jake. We can't just spend without thinking." He would just roll his eyes. "You worry too much." Despite our differences, we loved each other deeply. So, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I believed that love could overcome any obstacle, and I was ready to start a new chapter of my life with Jake. Meeting the in-laws is always a nerve-wracking experience, but when Jake asked me to join a family dinner, I wasn't just nervous, I was curious. I had already heard snippets about Jake's family and their money habits, and I was eager to get the full picture. Their house was a large, sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. As we drove up the long driveway, I noticed the numerous cars parked outside, many of which looked brand new. As we entered, I was greeted with a loud cheer from Jake's relatives. They were a lively bunch, and the house was filled with laughter and chatter. Jake's mother, Linda, was a petite woman with a warm smile. She hugged me tightly and said, "It's so good to finally meet you." I smiled back. "Thank you for having me." Jake's father, Mark, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a booming voice. "So, you're the lawyer who's captured our Jake's heart," he chuckled, shaking my hand firmly. "It seems that way," I laughed. Dinner was a grand affair. The table was laden with dishes, and wine glasses clinked cheerfully. As we ate, I observed the dynamics of Jake's family. They talked about their recent purchases and the vacations they had been on, or were planning to go on. Money seemed to flow freely in their conversations, and I got the sense that they didn't think twice before spending. Linda mentioned a recent shopping spree in Paris. Mark spoke of a new business venture that required a significant investment. Their younger daughter, Sarah, excitedly chatted about her plans to study abroad. At one point, Jake's older sister, Emily, turned to me. "So, how do you manage your finances? Being a lawyer, you must be earning a lot." I hesitated for a moment before answering. "I try to save and invest wisely. It's important to have a financial safety net." Jake jumped in. "She's the practical one in our relationship." Emily laughed. "Sounds like you two balance each other out." The evening went on, and I could feel the difference in our lifestyles. While I was always cautious about spending, Jake's family seemed to have a live for today mentality. It was clear that they enjoyed the finer things in life and didn't hesitate to indulge. As the night drew to a close, Linda pulled me aside. "You know, dear," she began, "Jake is lucky to have you, but do let him have his fun. Money is meant to be enjoyed." I nodded politely. "Of course. I just believe in being careful." She patted my hand. "Balance is key." As Jake and I drove back home, the weight of our differences hung in the air. I turned to him. "Your family is lovely, but we have very different views on money." Jake sighed. "I know, but love is about compromise, right?" I smiled. "Yes, but compromise doesn't mean losing oneself." Jake reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out." But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling that our financial differences, combined with the influence of Jake's family, would soon lead to challenges that neither of us were prepared for. And so it happened. We were barely through the front door when the tension in Jake's family home became apparent. The large living room, which I remembered as a place of laughter and chatter during our last visit, was now filled with anxious faces. Everyone was there. Jake's parents, his siblings, and most notably, his younger brother Ryan. I had always found Ryan a bit unpredictable. He was the sort of person who took chances, always believing the next big break was just around the corner. That day, he looked restless, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding direct contact. Without much preamble, Linda, Jake's mother, began, "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a serious situation on our hands." Ryan, with a sigh, came forward. "I messed up. I owe the bank $100,000. They're saying they'll take legal action if I don't pay soon." The room erupted in a flurry of questions and exclaims. Jake's hand tightened around mine. He looked more shocked than anyone. Mark, Jake's father, rubbed his temples. "Ryan, we always warned you about getting involved in those sketchy deals." Ryan snapped back. "I thought they were good investments." Seeing where the discussion might be heading, Linda tried to refocus the group. "The blame game won't help. We need to find a solution." Emily, Jake's sister, interjected, "Why don't we all chip in? If we pool our resources, we might cover most of it." Mark sighed. "Most of our money is tied up. We can't pull out that kind of cash right now." Then, all eyes turned to me. I felt trapped, like a deer in headlights. I sensed what was coming next. Jake, squeezing my hand tighter, spoke up. "You've got savings, right? We can use that to help Ryan out." I looked at him in disbelief. Was he seriously suggesting this? Linda's eyes brightened. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Can you help, dear?" I tried to remain calm. "Jake, we've talked about being careful with our finances. My savings are for our future." Jake's face reddened. "This is family. Don't you care about my brother?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, aren't we supposed to be family now? Or does money matter more to you?" Feeling cornered, I replied, "I understand this is a tough situation, but why should I hand over my hard-earned savings when there might be other solutions? Maybe I can help negotiate with the bank? Work out a plan?" Jake's voice grew louder. "This isn't the time for legal advice. Ryan needs help now." Linda chimed in, with an edge to her voice. "We thought family meant something to you. Guess we were wrong." The room felt stifling, the weight of their expectations and accusations pressing down on me. I had hoped Jake would be my ally, but he seemed to have chosen his family's side. The meeting ended with no resolution. As Jake and I walked back to the car, I felt a chasm growing between us. The dawning light had always been a comforting sight, but this morning its warmth was overshadowed by a chilling discovery. Glancing at my phone, I saw an alarming bank notification. My heart thudded heavily as I saw the staggering amount. $150,000 had been transferred out of my savings, and even more shockingly, it had been sent to Jake's account. Confusion and dread wrapped around me. This couldn't be right. Without hesitation, I tried calling Jake, but he didn't answer. I sent a message. "Jake, why is there $150,000 transferred to your account? We need to talk. Now." Time ticked by, and every silent moment only amplified my anxiety. He didn't respond. The swirling unease forced me into action, and I decided to confront him at his workplace. As I approached his office, I saw his empty desk. One of his colleagues, Sarah, looked up and said, "Looking for Jake? He's taken the day off. Some personal matters," he mentioned. I muttered a thanks, my thoughts racing even faster now. With growing dread, I decided to go to his parents' place. Perhaps they knew something, or perhaps they could get Jake to talk to me. The large wooden door of their house looked more imposing than ever. I knocked assertively. After a brief moment, Linda, Jake's mother, opened the door just a crack. Her guarded expression told me she was aware of something. "I need to speak to Jake," I demanded. Linda glanced behind her, hesitating. "Jake isn't here," she replied. "Where is he? He's taken a huge amount from our joint savings. I need answers." Her face remained passive. "I don't know about any money," she claimed, but her eyes darted away. "Let me in. We need to discuss this," I insisted. But instead of yielding, she firmly stated, "I think it's best if you leave," and shut the door in my face. The blatant act left me stunned. Standing there, I realized the gravity of the betrayal. They knew, and they were covering for him. The reception area of the police station was bustling. Uniformed officers moved to and fro, the hum of conversation punctuated by the ring of phones. I approached the front desk, where an officer sat, looking engrossed in paperwork. "Excuse me," I began, my voice slightly shaky. "I need to report a significant unauthorized transaction from my bank account. It's my husband." The officer, whose name tag read Perez, looked up, her eyes filled with understanding. "Take a seat." She gestured to the chairs nearby. "I'll call someone to assist you." Sitting down, my thoughts swirled. Was I really about to report my own husband? Before I could contemplate further, a tall officer approached me. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Officer Daniels. Officer Perez informed me about your situation. Let's go to my office where we can talk." We walked down a corridor, and he gestured to a chair opposite his desk. As I explained the situation to him, I noticed his brows furrow in concern. "So, you believe your husband took this money without your consent?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, and his family seems to be in on it. They shut me out when I went to confront them." Officer Daniels jotted down notes. "Do you have any evidence of this transaction?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank notification and the message I had sent Jake, as well as his vague reply. Officer Daniels looked at the screen, his expression serious. "This certainly helps, but it's going to be a complicated case, given that he's your husband. Do you wish to press charges?" Taking a deep breath, I responded, "Yes, I do. I feel betrayed and violated. I need to stand up for myself." He nodded. "I understand. We'll start the process. It may take time, but we'll support you every step of the way." "Thank you," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. Officer Daniels extended a comforting hand. "It's tough, I know, but you're doing the right thing. We'll get to the bottom of this." The courtroom was a daunting place, its high ceilings echoing the whispers of the people inside. Rows of wooden benches filled with friends, family, reporters, and strangers who had taken an interest in the case. The tension was palpable. I sat on one side, dressed conservatively, my best friend Sarah by my side for support. Across the room, Jake sat with his parents. He avoided making eye contact with me. The judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair tied back neatly, cleared her throat, signaling the start of the proceedings. "Order in the court," she declared. The prosecution began by detailing the charges against Jake: the unauthorized transaction, the evasion when confronted, and the role of Jake's family in possibly abetting the crime. It was painful to relive the betrayal as the evidence was presented. Bank statements, my call records, and the security footage from Jake's parents' home on the day I confronted them. Then it was Jake's turn to testify. He stood, looking much smaller than I remembered. "Your Honor, I admit to transferring the money, but I did it out of desperation. My family was drowning in debt. I thought if I took the money, it would fix everything. I planned to return it." I clenched my fists. He was playing the victim card. The prosecutor spoke up. "Mr. Collins, did you discuss this with your wife before taking such a drastic step?" Jake hesitated. "No, I thought she wouldn't understand." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So, you decided stealing was the better option?" Jake lowered his gaze. "I made a mistake." The trial went on for hours. Witnesses were called, statements were read. When the time came for me to testify, I felt a lump in my throat. With every ounce of strength, I recounted the events, the betrayal, the pain of being shut out by someone I had once loved. Sarah was called up next. She spoke of my character, my hard work, my dedication to building a life with Jake, and the anguish I had experienced when discovering the betrayal. When the closing statements were made, the room held its collective breath. The judge, after taking her time, declared, "Mr. Collins, you've admitted to your crime, and while I understand your intent was not malicious, the act was a clear violation of trust. You will return the full amount of $150,000 to Mrs. Collins immediately and pay an additional fine for this unauthorized transaction." Jake's face went pale. His parents seemed equally shocked. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I advise both parties to consider mediation to resolve any personal disputes." As I left the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The man I had once dreamt of building a life with was now a stranger, a criminal in my eyes. After the court proceedings, my mind kept going back to one thing. How did Jake's family end up in such a mess in the first place? And why was I, a mere bystander in their family affairs, paying the price? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to find out the root cause. The first person I thought to reach out to was Amanda, Jake's ex-girlfriend from before we met. She had once mentioned how Jake's family had a penchant for shady dealings. Back then, I had dismissed her words as jealousy, but now I wondered if there was some truth to it. I dialed her number, half expecting her not to pick up, but she did. "Hello?" "Hey, Amanda, it's Rachel. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to talk." She paused, then replied, "About Jake?" "Yes." We met up at a quiet coffee shop the next day. Amanda looked different, more mature and composed than I remembered. After exchanging pleasantries, I got straight to the point. "Amanda, you once told me about Jake's family, about their dealings. I need to know more." She sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. "I wondered when you'd ask. Jake's family has been involved in some sketchy businesses for years. Loan sharking, shady investments, you name it. They've always been about quick money." I frowned, but Jake never seemed that way, at least not when we were dating. Amanda shook her head. He tried to distance himself from it, but family ties run deep, and when his brother got into that massive debt, he got sucked right back in. My heart sank. "So, all this time?" She nodded. "He's been trying to bail them out. I warned you, remember? I saw the signs, the desperation, the sneaky phone calls, but you were too in love to see." I stared down, fighting back tears. I can't believe I was so naive. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You're not the first, and won't be the last. They're masters of manipulation." The conversation shifted, and I learned that Jake's brother had a gambling problem. The debts weren't from a failed business or medical emergency. They were from nights spent at underground gambling dens and high-stakes poker games. I thanked Amanda for her honesty and clarity. As I walked back to my car, everything made sense. The secrecy, the desperation, the betrayal. Jake's family was drowning, and in their desperation, they tried to drag me down with them. After the dust settled, one thing was clear to me. I needed to put the past firmly behind me. The first step was finalizing the divorce from Jake. It was a relatively quick process, given the circumstances. My lawyer, an old friend from law school, ensured that it went smoothly without me having to face Jake again. One evening, after a long day at work, I met up with some college friends for dinner. Sarah, always the one with the latest gossip, leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You remember Jake's brother, right? Heard he's been locked up for fraud." I raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." She shook her head. Wish I was. Multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. They say he'd been scamming people for years. Anna chimed in. And that's not all. Jake's parents' property? Seized and auctioned off to clear their mounting debts. I took a deep breath, processing the information. It's just sad. That family had so many issues, so many problems. Sarah squeezed my hand. You dodged a bullet, girl, and look at you now, moving on, living your best life. I smiled, grateful for the support. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finding my way. Life continued. Days turned into weeks, and then months. The wounds of the past slowly began to heal, and I started building a life that was truly mine. One evening, as I was settling down with a book, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I answered cautiously. Hello? Hey, it's Jake, came the hesitant voice. A chill ran down my spine. What do you want? He cleared his throat. Look, I know I've done wrong. I'm in a tough spot right now, financially. I was wondering if... No. I cut him off sharply. But I just need a little help to... No, Jake. You and your family have taken enough from me. I owe you nothing. I replied, my voice cold and firm. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, defeated, all right. I ended the call, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that I had moved on, that I was no longer entangled in their web of deceit and drama. Over time, I immersed myself in work and spent quality time with friends and family who genuinely cared about me. I learned to value and trust myself more than ever, firmly believing that no matter what life threw my way, I would always come out stronger on the other side.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident, especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it." Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. "Do you two know each other?" "Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, 'I'm moving to the sales department soon.' If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.